Welcome to the Dynamics of Everyday Life, where we demystify some tricky concepts and get to know ourselves a little bit better. Welcome back to the Dynamics of Everyday Life. Today we're going to be talking about something that impacts every single one of us, and that's how we maintain relationships with other people. For some relationships, this might feel like a breeze for us. It happens without us even thinking about it. And for other relationships, it might be a bit more challenging, and we can feel like walking up a mountain into a force 9 wind whilst wearing high heels and a bikini. Not the easiest. Unless, of course, that's your idea of a fun weekend. Over the next few weeks, we're going to talk about all the different relationships that can crop up in everyday life and what might get in the way. Today I'm going to be looking at the common factor, and that's ourselves and how we might get in our own way in relationships. In the first episode, we introduced ourselves to Freud's structure of the mind, the conscious, preconscious and unconscious, and we started to understand how the unconscious has a huge impact on our identity in the way that it can shape our choices and our behaviours. We also looked at the importance that awareness has in helping us learn more about ourselves. We're going to go a step further into the unconscious and start to look at defence mechanisms and how these impact our lives. Freud talks about defence mechanisms and how they're techniques to reduce the impact of anxiety on us. So for want of a better term, they're our inbuilt anxiety management system. Now, we're always going to feel some form of anxiety or conflict, so we all need to have some ways of dealing with anxiety. These are unconscious processes and they get built up over time. We're not going to know that we're using them because they have become our unconscious go-to ways that keep us safe. Now, there are many defence mechanisms that the unconscious mind employs, and all will impact how we interact with other people. But the ones that are most often going to affect our relationships include, but aren't excluded to, projection, splitting, idealisation, displacement, and rationalisation. We're going to break these down a bit so that we understand them a bit more. Projection. This is where we put the bits of ourselves that we don't like into other people, as we can't bear them being part of ourselves. For example, if you're always late and know that you're always late, but you don't want to admit to this, you might complain about a co-worker who's late. Splitting. This is where we see someone as either all good or all bad. So as you can imagine, this can be incredibly difficult to live up to if someone's seen as all good, and somewhat unfair if someone's seen as all bad. We've got idealisation, so this is really closely linked to splitting, where a personal situation is idealised. Then we've got displacement, best described as kicking the cat, where we can't show our feelings to the personal situation that they're related to. So what we do is we displace them onto other people to help us to get rid of the unpleasant feelings. We've got the slightly cliched example of someone getting shouted at by their boss, and then this person comes home and shouts at their partner because obviously they can't shout at their boss, they can't retaliate back to their boss. The partner often has no idea what's gone on. And then we've got rationalisation, where we give ourselves reasons to justify our behaviour. There are many other defence mechanisms that we all use on a day-to-day basis, but these are the ones that can absolutely get in the way when we're relating to other people. We talked last time about the importance of awareness and how this can help us understand a bit more about who we are, and awareness is also key when it comes to defence mechanisms and how we might be getting in our own way. So thinking about relationships and awareness, what can we do when we come up against a challenge? Much as it might be tempting to bury our head in the sand about the problem, so employing denial or avoidance, other popular defence mechanisms, we could almost play defence mechanism bingo at this point, or by blaming the other person, we can start to ask ourselves some questions to try and work out what might be going on. These can include things like, what is the thing I don't like about the other person telling me about myself? If there's something that annoys me about the other person, where do I see it in myself? How realistic is my version of this personal situation? What lens am I looking at this personal situation through? And what am I telling myself is okay, even though it actually really might not be? Now, I'm not suggesting here that your feelings regarding this relationship or relationships aren't valid. Far from it. What I am encouraging is to take a step back to see if there's something else going on to help you understand the situation better, and therefore you have more control over it. We're most likely dealing with other people's defensive behaviour too, not just our own, and this can make it incredibly hard to spot what's going on. And for other people, whilst we might have an idea, we're not ever going to know for sure what defence mechanism they might be employing. We can only guess. What we do know is, though, that we don't have control over other people. We only have control over ourselves. So by getting a handle on what defence mechanisms we might be employing, this is our best way of boosting our own awareness and ensuring that we're entering the relationship in the way that works best for us. The other thing to be aware of is that defence mechanisms might not necessarily be a bad thing. Let's consider rationalisation. So a friend might be incredibly unhappy at work, but isn't able to leave their job because they need to pay the mortgage. And so whilst they look for another role, they tell themselves that it's okay really. They rationalise their situation so they don't need to think about how they really truly feel. It's not going to be helpful if we wade in at this point and tell them they're rationalising the situation. Actually, it is absolutely horrendous and we're surprised they're managing to get through the day at all. It's really not up to us to deconstruct someone else's defence system, because what then happens is we risk them feeling exposed. Imagine how we would feel if someone tried to deconstruct our defences without our consent. It doesn't feel safe at all. But our responsibility lies in recognising our own defensive behaviour and then considering whether it's something that's helping us or if we're getting in our own way. If it's helping us, there's always the possibility that it's keeping us distant from other people. And that could be a question we want to consider. How can we keep ourselves safe whilst also connected to other people? If it's hindering us, what do we think we're protecting ourselves from? How can we feel safe in a way that doesn't trip us up and actually promotes our relationships? Relationships also aren't static. They have a life and energy all of their own. And this is created by the people who are actually involved in the relationship. It can be incredibly easy to fall into the blame trap, or maybe splitting and deciding that the problem is all with the other person. Sometimes relationships, in all their variations, so intimate relationships, friendships, work relationships, they just don't work out. And these are for reasons that are nothing to do with defence mechanisms getting in the way. We're actually going to talk about this, other possible reasons, in coming episodes. But it is worth considering if you're experiencing a relationship as difficult or uncomfortable. Is this because there's just some defensive behaviour swirling around in the mix? And if so, what can you do about it? Looking at ourselves at this level can be really challenging and unnerving as we develop our awareness. So I'd always encourage you that you do this at your own speed. And if you feel you need some extra help around this, then I've put together a PDF resource sheet and you can find the link for this in the show notes. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Dynamics of Everyday Life. Please hit the follow button for future episodes and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow me on Instagram at The Dynamics of Everyday Life or find me on LinkedIn at Julia Rogers. I'd love to hear from you and hear your thoughts on dynamics. The Dynamics of Everyday Life is brought to you by Coaching 42 and the fabulous team at the Podcast Boutique.